comes in. Because, if you make enough money, when does some start getting put back into the game? And effectively, what the domestic fans are saying is that, those of us that go to the games regularly need to be subsidised by money that is made elsewhere. Because what the league doing, the Premier League said, part of our product is the atmosphere in the grounds, it's the crowds. So we are the customers, we're part of the product now as well. It's an interesting discussion, which is maybe going off on a bit of a tangent for this podcast. But
no, this is great.
It's interesting too. And Martin or Adam, I can't remember if it was one of you that tweeted it out earlier, and I think I had retweeted and tried to expound on it earlier in the week. It was once said that this game would accrue so much money that the fans would be able to go for free.
Well, that was claimed by Lord Sugar. We should call him Lord now by his proper title, because apparently he takes exception when people don't call him Lord. At one stage, he made the comment, bit of a throwaway, flippant comment, but had some interest to it, that he said, we'll get to the stage, if the TV deals keep on rising as they are, well, we can let the fans in for free. He laughed as he said it, because someone like him would never even countenance the idea of subsidising people and letting them in for free. But this was, this was late 90s, and we're getting to, like almost 15 years on.
Yeah, and it's taken this long, to be honest with you, to really grasp on, and it's because of the NBC television contract. I think that it's fully manifested itself into what it's become, because it just does my head in when I see some of my, I call them friends, but the people that I've met through social media that are over there. Well, we can't watch the game this week, it's not on TV. And I'm like, what are you talking about? We see every game in high definition on TV.
For free.
Loaded for nothing. Yeah,
for free.
It's all there.
For free. I mean, will that happen in England now? Will you finally be able to, on adult, you watch all the matches when you want for free without the Sky subscription, or no, that's the nature of why it's $5 billion, because you're going to be paying out the arse for it?
Not at the moment. Well, they've still got the condition that they can't broadcast games, for example, at 3 o'clock on a Saturday.
It's insane.
That kind of like sacrosanct time where games can't be broadcast.
Why is that? What's the philosophy behind that?
Well, it dates back to the original broadcasting deals. There was a fear, a perception that if games were broadcast, this even goes back to radio, that if games were broadcast then, that fans would be dissuaded from actually going along to the games.
Right.
There's a legacy of that.
And that becomes an issue, because when we watched our match against West Brom at the Hawthorns, and then the following weekend watched Stoke at Newcastle. There's nobody in the seats. We had more people at the Hawthorns, arguably, than West Brom did. And if you give them the opportunity to just sit home and watch the game, they're never going to go to the ground, especially if a team starts to struggle. I mean, that's got to be the premise behind this whole thing.
I don't know, though, but if you're able to redistribute some of this money back into the clubs, and you do it in a manner that forces the clubs to truly reinvest back into their product, quality of play, i.e. players, and you have a good product. They haven't seen it in the NFL, right? I mean, that used to be the rule in the NFL, but no longer is it. You got a good product. You have a good product there, and people still go.
But here's the question that I want to pose back then to Martin and Adam. If that happens, and all the clubs are, if you're in the Premiership, you're all going to get X amount of dollars from this television contract, and it's all going to be equal. It'll all be relative, and it'll all be equal. Does that breed too much parity? Is the EPL something that does not want parity? They'd rather have a couple of super clubs and then let these, for lack of a better term, bottom feeders fight it out for relegation, so that this system that we have implemented, that's been going on forever and ever, continues to do what it's supposed to do. Because if you get the 20 teams in the EPL that all of a sudden are going to get a big chunk of this $5.1 billion contract, the teams may go down, but then these new teams are going to come up and they're going to say, I want my piece too. Meanwhile, the teams that are in the top 17 are all within 10 points of each other because of the parity that the league now has. I don't think that's a good thing.
We're getting an imbalance, particularly between the Premier League and the Football League. I mean, as it stands now under the existing TV deal, the team that finishes bottom of the Premier League will earn a minimum £80 million revenue. Comparably, in the Championship, I think they're earning about £1.5 million, £2 million from TV. So that gap is enormous, and it's going to widen. Under the new TV deal, the team that finishes bottom will receive £100 million.
Oh, wow.
It's almost better just to stay up than winning the league.
Well, even those teams that go down, if those teams that get relegated, they've got to be pretty badly run and pretty badly managed if they don't then come back up.
Yeah.
Because they have inbuilt advantages, they have parachute payments, they have all that revenue that they earn from being in the Premier League, and they can just blow other teams out of the water.
Well, that's why the comparisons come up with the NFL, because people are saying that does the successful business of English football why it's so successful? And part of the reason it's successful is because that anybody has a chance to win. And from when I was watching football now in the 70s, the playing club and Nottingham Forest got promoted from the second division into the first division, won the next season European Cup, and the season after that they won the European Cup again. Now that could absolutely never happen now because of the way that money changed the game. Nottingham Forest, small little club, they had crowds, so they've never earned sort of money that the big clubs and big metropolis earn, but also you've now got, because of the way the TV deals works and because of these parachute payments, if you look at the teams that have gone up and down over the past 10 or 15 years, there are a collection of teams that have always been in the Premier League. There's a section of teams that have gone between the Premier League and Championship, and the yo-yo clubs they call them, and then there's everybody else. But part of the problem is, even though the gap's widening, everybody believes that they can get there, and just getting into the Premier League is the only thing that's important now. Once you're in there, you're earning money, and as Adam said, you have to be pretty badly run to drop right out of there and not have any money. But some clubs have been incredibly badly run. Look at the Leeds United team of the early 90s. They got European Cup semi-finals. They overspent. Their business plan was based on them being that successful every year, and they couldn't sustain. And they are still recovering from that. It was 15, nearly 20 years later as well. So that's the lesson. So it's not making the league more competitive. And people now say, actually, there's probably only 2 or 3 teams that can win the league.
Right. So just to
for the last few years, it's a so go on.
Oh no, I was just going to ask you. So to be clear, you get call it 80 to I guess in the new contract 100 million to go down. What do teams get just to remain in the league that you stave off relegation? Is there payments to clubs just to stay in the league each year?
I think it goes up in increments of about about £2 million per position. And then you get merit payments depending on finish, and you get extra payments depending on how many times that you're broadcast on Sky or BT. So you can get big discrepancies between the team that finishes bottom and the team that finishes top.
That's interesting because okay, so let's go harken back to the end of the last window and all this discussion about Danny Ings as a player that's going to be out of contract. And it was just, to me, it was just one big break-even analysis as to whether or not Burnley should have got rid of him or not. Should you take a payment now and do you really worry about the fact that you may go down because you're going to get $60 million for going down, and you get the money from selling the player as well? And I just so I didn't know whether there was if you're a mid-table club, what are you roughly getting for staying up each year?
I think the reasoning with Burnley was that they could take the money for the transfer on a reduced basis because of the contract running down.
Yeah.
Take that in the summer because it made more sense to retain a guy that can score goals and keep them in the division.
Yeah.
But he wouldn't want to stay though, right? I mean
I doubt that.
Yeah,
the deal's probably done. Move.
Arguably, that's what Spurs have done over the past 10 years. I talked about them being a comparatively well-run club. Spurs, for the past 10 years, have sold their best players and moved on. Now, you say, well, from a fan's point of view, you want to hold on to your best player. From a fan's point of view, actually, if you're running football, it's not about winning at all. It's about making sure that you don't go bust, making sure you've got, and all football's ridiculous now is that you have to be in the Premier League. That's the only game in town, really, because of the money that we've talked about.
Sure.
If you get a bit more ambitious than that, really the only place to be is the Champions League, the Euro Champions League. So you have to finish in the top 4. So you can get to a situation, this whole argument about, what's the worth of the Europa League at the moment. The Europa League is seen as the secondary competition in Europe is a distraction. So you might be in a position where it's probably better to lose a few games at the end of the season and not push in a qualifying place for the league. So you have a chance playing few games but qualifying for the Champions League the next season because that's where more money is. And people are having serious conversations now saying, would you rather win the League Cup against Chelsea in a couple of weeks' time, or would you rather finish fourth if you had to choose between the two? Now a fan every time is going to say win the cup. I think this is what the game's about. What's the game? From a business review, that's a good thing in the club, because actually what you should say as the chairman of the club is top 4, because that's where the money is. But then you keep earning the money. What are you going to do with it? At some stage, it's got to mean that you need to win something. But that's where this contradiction between the business and the sporting side of the sport is really come forward.
Yeah, I mean, the kind of starkest illustration of that was when Chelsea won the Champions League, and thus denying us our rightful place in the Champions League the next season.
Right.
But people, sensible, intelligent people, were seriously saying before that game, before the Champions League final, because Chelsea had finished out of the automatic qualification spots, there was this commentary that Chelsea had to win that trophy, that game. They had to win the title in order to qualify for next season's Champions League. So we were in this, completely crazy situation where people were saying winning, arguably the greatest trophy that a football team can win, wasn't an end, but a means to another end itself. And this constant desire, this constant desperate need to be in the Champions League. And I think at that point, football was getting its priorities seriously wrong.
Yeah, and in many respects, it completely reversed our path. That was an ironic, cruel, Spursy twist.
Get used to it.
Yeah, right.
It's going to be more.
It seems that one of the things too, when Pochettino was brought in, one of the stigmas about him was he's not really interested in all the cups. He never was at Southampton. He never really tried for him at Espanyol, and we kind of, as fans, look at that and go, well, we're kind of a cup team. How is this all going to play out? I think he's done an actually really remarkable job, considering all of the other hardships that have gone on. The main one being that it seems, I think up to this point, we have played more games total than any other team in the English Premier League, except for maybe Arsenal. I think we're just about running neck and neck with them for matches played. As we get closer to this cup final, it seems like everybody wants to pour every effort into this thing, and Europa League, because of we play Thursday, then we play Sunday, then we play the following Thursday. We have a bit of a run coming up with West Ham kind of sandwiched in between the two legs against Fiorentina. As a fan, and I want to kind of maybe pose this to both you, Martin and Adam. As a fan and a newer fan to the club, all I want to do is win stuff, and this is a prime opportunity for us to go out, win a piece of silverware, and then maybe back it up. We're not going to win the league. We have, I think, an opportunity to be able to, if we can stay healthy enough, especially up front at center forward with a certain young Englishman named Harry Kane. Stay healthy. We have an opportunity for top four, but there is so much that now lies in this Europa League championship, albeit there are some phenomenal teams that remain in this tournament. Where, from your standpoint, as people who have been following this club for a very long time and understand more about the dynamics of what's happening currently with the club, the depth of the club, where should our priorities lie?
Well, as a fan, I would say go for the trophies. That's where the priority lies. I'm a bit of a stick in the mud and a bit of a dinosaur in my attitude towards finishing fourth and getting into the Champions League. I understand the commercial imperative. I understand the need to be competing in that competition. But like I say, I'm old-fashioned, and a trophy will always count for much more for me personally.
Yeah. And it always kind of did my head in on Twitter, social media. I'm convinced there's a lot of people out there that just like to troll, or for whatever reason, but they always look at Europa League as a distraction. Well, what would Champions League be? It's the same exact distraction played on a different day. You're playing it on Tuesday instead of Thursday, or whatever the case may be for the scheduling, but it just means that much more money for the club. And in the fans' eyes, maybe we can buy Memphis Depay or Lacazette or whoever it is that we want to bring in. We would have bought Wilfred Boney and not let him go to City. It's that kind of mentality that I think is this. Again, we talk about instant gratification, and we want all these things because you now have everybody playing FIFA 15 or Football Manager, and they think that we should be able to just go out and buy everything. I think with our club especially, not disrupting the chemistry that we've got with these, what was it? We've got, 4 regular starters now that work their way up through the academy, and others that are in, lie in waiting. Other clubs don't have that, and I think that continuity is what's actually enabled Pochettino to take it and use that as the glue as he molds this thing together.
I think that's right, and I think Pochettino's a very smart guy as well, by the way, in terms of what he's done so far this season. But I think